Have you ever looked around and felt like everyone else received the instructions for life, except you? Your friends seem certain. They choose careers with confidence. They build relationships. They celebrate milestones that make it look as though life unfolds according to a predictable timeline. Yet no matter how hard you try, something inside you refuses to move at the same pace. You hesitate. You question. You overthink. And sometimes you wonder if you're simply falling behind. But what if that feeling isn't a sign that something is wrong with you? What if it's evidence that your mind is developing according to a completely different rhythm? Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung believed that the greatest journey a person can take is not the pursuit of success, but the discovery of the authentic self. He called this lifelong process individuation, the gradual unfolding of who you truly are beneath expectations, labels, and social roles. For some people, this journey begins much later than society expects, not because they are lazy or incapable, but because their psyche refuses to settle for a life that doesn't genuinely belong to them. Perhaps you've spent years feeling out of place, watching others move ahead while you remained uncertain. If that's your experience, this video may explain why. Most people build their identity by absorbing the world around them. From childhood, they adopt the beliefs, ambitions, and values of their family, culture, and friends. This process helps them adapt quickly. They know what success should look like because someone else has already defined it for them. For many, this works well enough. But Jung observed that there are individuals whose inner world is simply too alive to accept borrowed identities without question. These people don't just think, they reflect, they analyze, they dream. Their unconscious constantly presents questions that refuse to be ignored. Every major decision feels significant because it isn't just about choosing a job or a relationship. It feels like choosing an identity. This is why they often appear indecisive. From the outside, others may see hesitation. Internally, something much deeper is happening. Their psyche is quietly asking, is this truly my path? Because every false choice feels like a betrayal of something essential. Jung believed that when people build their lives around roles that do not reflect their authentic nature, they eventually experience psychological conflict. They may achieve success by society's standards while feeling strangely empty inside. For those walking the path of individuation, the unconscious resists this compromise. That resistance often looks like delay, but delay is not always failure. Sometimes it is protection. One of the hardest periods for this kind of person is their 20s. While classmates build careers and families, they may feel lost, uncertain, or disconnected. It can seem as though everyone else is moving forward while they remain standing still. Comparison becomes painful. Questions become relentless. Why can't I figure it out? Why does everything feel so complicated? What is wrong with me? According to Jungian psychology, these questions are not obstacles to growth. They are growth. Because beneath the confusion, the mind is slowly constructing something far more durable than external success. It is building psychological integrity. Instead of asking, what will impress other people? The deeper question becomes, what is actually true for me? That question takes longer to answer. But once answered, it creates a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. Jung often warned about living through the expectations of others. He believed that a life built entirely on approval eventually demands a psychological price. Many people spend decades climbing ladders they never wanted to climb. Only later do they discover that the destination feels empty. The person who struggles early may avoid that painful realization later. Another reason this journey feels difficult is heightened awareness. Some people naturally notice things others overlook. They sense hidden tensions during conversations. They recognize when someone is pretending. They feel uncomfortable participating in social games that reward appearances over authenticity. This heightened awareness can become both a gift and a burden. It allows deeper understanding, but it also creates isolation. When everyone around you seems excited about goals that leave you emotionally untouched, it becomes difficult to pretend. You may begin withdrawing, not because you dislike people, but because superficial interactions leave you feeling exhausted rather than fulfilled. Others may call you quiet, reserved, or overly serious. Yet beneath that silence is often an incredibly active inner life. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks through symbols, dreams, emotions, and intuition. For those deeply connected to this inner world, solitude becomes more than an escape. It becomes a place of discovery. This is why loneliness often becomes part of the individuation process. Not because isolation is the goal, but because silence allows the authentic self to emerge without constant interference from outside expectations. These periods of solitude can feel incredibly painful. There may be moments when you question whether you belong anywhere, moments when you consider abandoning your search simply to fit in. The temptation to conform becomes strongest when loneliness lasts longer than expected. Yet Jung warned that betraying the emerging self creates inner conflict that follows a person for years. The false life may earn admiration, but it rarely brings peace. The authentic life often requires courage before it brings confidence. Eventually, something begins to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. The need to compare yourself with others begins to fade. You stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline. You no longer chase every opportunity simply because everyone else is chasing it. Instead, your decisions become slower, more intentional, more aligned. You begin trusting yourself. This quiet confidence is very different from the confidence that comes from status or achievement. It doesn't depend on applause. It doesn't disappear when circumstances change. It comes from knowing that your life reflects your deepest values. People notice this kind of presence, not because you speak louder, but because you no longer need to prove who you are. Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection. It is wholeness. Wholeness means accepting both your strengths and your weaknesses, your light and your shadow, your confidence and your uncertainty. Instead of fighting every imperfect part of yourself, you begin integrating those parts into a complete human being. That is true psychological maturity. If you've spent years believing you were behind, perhaps it's time to consider another possibility. Perhaps your journey was never meant to look like everyone else's. Perhaps those years of questioning weren't wasted. Perhaps every moment of uncertainty was quietly shaping the person you are becoming. The world often celebrates speed, but nature rarely does. The strongest trees spend years growing roots before they reach toward the sky. Human character develops much the same way. The deepest transformations are usually invisible long before they become obvious. So if your path has felt slower, if you've wrestled with doubt, if you've struggled to fit into expectations that never felt like your own, don't assume you've failed. You may simply be walking one of life's most demanding and ultimately most rewarding journeys, becoming the person you were always meant to be. Because in the end, the greatest success isn't living a life that impresses everyone else. It's living a life that genuinely feels like your own.